morning, everyone. I'm here today to talk to you about product security, the art of accompanying a project or a development project to deliver a product or a services secure by design. So a little bit of who I am first. So I'm Tiffaine Roman-Latapi. I'm actually leading the reverse engineering team of Synactive. So Synactive is a company specialized in offensive security services, and our team, as a reverse engineering team, specializes, of course, in reverse engineering, but also vulnerability research and exploitation. And before that, so I led the internal evaluation team at Airbus, also called Red Team. I was a product security leader at Orange, in particular for a big program where we were something like 15 security engineers. And I also worked as a cryptographic expert for the French government. So what I'm trying to do today with this presentation is actually convey my experience regarding to product security during all my years of professional experience. So I'm going to begin with what I believe is the most common misconception regarding cybersecurity in company. I'm going to go after that on the most common mistake in product security. And finally, what should be product security in a perfect world. Please keep in mind in this presentation, this is my experience. It's what I believe. Sometimes, most of the time, I think it's things that I've tried to do, but it's not something that's going to work in our situation. So please adapt it. So, product security. Most of the people think it's a highly technical activity, and it can be. Most of the time, people don't make the difference between product security and hackers, which is not the same. What I think it's important for people to know is what we really do is actually using a lot of energy in trying to convince people to follow basic best security practices. And I mean best practices that we know since 15 years or so, like don't use admin as a credentials. Another thing I've seen a lot, and I think it's really something that could complicate things for a product security function, is where is actually a cyber security function within the company when it exists. So most of the time, cybersecurity is put within the information management or IT organization. And for me, this organization is either a product function, so it develops internal tools or external product, depending on what your company is doing, or it offers production tools like mail, server, everything like operating technology in factory. So they deploy, they maintain them tool for the business, and they offer maintenance and help services. Most of the time, this is where cyber is. On the other side, look at what I call a support function, which is going to be finance and legal. So central functions that are here to advise and support. When you look at this function, they use technical knowledge, like specific knowledge of the law, for example, contract law, intellectual property law, international law, I don't know, or finance, to advise the business. They're here to help the business in taking informed decision. They're a risk management support function. The business, they're not here to tell the business what to do. They're here to tell the business, if you do this, this is a risk you're actually taking, and please take that into account when you take your decision. And for me, cyber should be here, and product security is typically this kind of function. We're using our technical knowledge in cybersecurity, in IT, to advise the business, the project, the program, whatever, in taking informed decision and to be aware of the risks they're taking or not during the launch of the product. So I'm going to talk about the most common mistakes I've seen in product security, whether when I was a product security officer or when I was in an attacker's team. So one of the first, or at least one of the one I've seen the most often, is the security by pen test or bug bounty. It's typically project or that did not care about security during their development phase, and at some point I've been forced to do a pen test or decide maybe it could be a good idea to do a pen test, and that's all. They think that's security, and because they've done a pen test, they're going to be secure. It doesn't work. First, if you didn't build your product to be actually secure, there is no way it's going to resist a pen test. So you're going to pay a pen test for basically nothing because you have no security. Bug bounty is the same. Bug bounty is interesting when you have a certain maturity in your products. So it's no way a security measure by itself. What I've also seen a lot, and maybe you've seen it too, is the project leader or the program leader accepting the risk. So you're gonna, as a security engineer, come to them and saying, we can't do that, there is actually a vulnerability or a big risk associated with this decision. And the project leader, who actually wants to finish this project as soon as possible because it's his incentive most of the time, are going to say, yes, okay, I'm gonna accept, where do I have to sign? But they're not actually the one bearing the risk. Typically on cyber you can have a risk which could have legal consequences, and someone may go to jail, for example. And the people who are going to jail are not the project leader. They are most of the time either the CEO of the company or specific people that have a specific contract that delegates the responsibility for into them. Same, I'm talking legal here and going to jail. We know that not a lot of people are going to jail because of security issue. If we talk just basic finance, the project leader is not the head of the entity that is going to pay if there is an issue. The company is going to pay, maybe a subgroup of the company is going to pay if there is a big issue. It's not going to be the project leader. So the actually incentive is to say no to security to go faster, and they're not bearing the risk at the end. So of course they're going to say no, they accept the risk. I've also seen, so we talk about the product leader, but I've also seen mistake on the security side. Typically security engineer who impose their view, who believes that since nobody seems to understand security and they know better, everybody should follow what they decided. So they impose technical solution and they're going to decide by themselves if the risk should be taken or not. And that's a big mistake, because it's not because you know a lot about security and IT that you actually know about production. For example, I've seen security engineer imposing certain certificate verification or certain crypto suite and at an ISP, and ISP takes billion of connection by second, and so a change of crypto suite can actually be much more complicated than on your own NAS at home, for example. And the security engineer doesn't know that most of the time. So you should not impose a solution. I've also seen that a mistake that could be done by security or by project, both. It's trying to do security without any risk analysis, any prior risk analysis. So we don't know where we're going. We don't know what we want to protect, against who, against how long. We don't know. We're trying to do security without a roadmap. This never works. So I've already talked a little about that. So security viewed as another production functionality. So we're going to talk about security engineers that are seen or are embedded in either developers team or architect teams. And security is seen as kind of a functionality because it's in the roadmap like another functionality development, but without customer added value. So it's going to be seen as optional. And because those security people are embedded in other teams, which are different incentive again, most of the time the warning will not be heard by the top management or the top level of the project of the program. Again, a common mistake is to have no end-to-end view of security. So we know when we do security that the attacker is going to take the path of least resistance, which means he's going to find the security function which is the weakest, or the point of the product which is the weakest. And so if you, for example, put everywhere a state-of-the-art crypto, which is going to cost money, but your password is admin, you've lost in any way. So people need to understand that security should be looked at like a full picture, end-to-end, to be actually effective. I've also seen passive security team. So everybody who has worked a little bit in product security will tell you we need to be there at the beginning of the project if you want us to be useful and effective. And it's rarely the case. Most of the time you don't get called. And I've seen a lot of security teams which are waiting to be called, just waiting, and are not proactive. Most of the time it's because they've lost hope. So they're like, nobody ever called us, I'm not gonna try, I'm done. But they get called, when they get called 2 days before going live, and we can't do nothing. If you're working in product security, you should go and try and talk to all the projects you know. Every time you hear about a new project being launched, you should go and say, hey, please call me, I'm here, I can help. If you wait, you're already lost. Again, another mistake I've seen is security decision making based only on perceived security cost. So what I call security decision making is when a project must decide if they're gonna do or not a security function, if they're gonna follow or not a security recommendation. And most of the time, what is happening is a security team say, hey, we should do that. Someone is a project say, yeah, but it costs 2 million. And that's all. And that's finished. And the security team finds itself in a defensive position where it must justify somehow that its requirement is a good requirement. Every requirement from security must be justified. And most of the time security teams are not equipped or doesn't think about talking money. So it's like you're saying at the project, which is not a security project, the cost is 2 million, and in front of that you put, maybe I have an attack scenario which could be catastrophic or not, but you're not talking money, you're not talking legal consequence. And so it's very difficult for a C-level, for example, to take the good decision. They're just going to see the 2 million. So I've talked about all the mistakes I've seen, and we're not gonna stay at that. The idea here is also to talk about how could we do better. So I'm going to try and talk to you about what could be product security in a perfect world. So first, in a perfect world, product security is an end-to-end product, which means it's integrated in all project steps when you have a project, from the beginning to the product life. So what I've put here, it's a basic timeline of a project, so it's not specific to a kind of development cycle, it's not a V cycle, it's not an agile, it's just basic timeline. Most of the development projects I've seen have those kind of steps. So you're going to decide to launch a project, you're going to have a marketing brief or a product management brief, which is going to say, I don't know, the product should make coffee, should pro rainbow, should cost no money, should consume no power, etc. You're gonna have something that could be called a book of requirement or specification or high-level specification. So that's gonna actually describe what does that mean to be able to do coffee. So you should have somewhere to put the coffee grain, you should have a pressure for the water, you should be able to heat water, etc., etc. And if you choose to make your product developed by an external company, you're gonna have a request for proposal. Then somewhere along the way, sometimes it's in the book requirement phase, sometimes it's on the request for proposal phase, you're gonna have detailed specification, a development phase, and a quality phase. And for example, in an agile mode, it could actually loop up. Then you're nearly finished, you've got your quality phase, you're going to prepare your product launch, you're going to launch it, and the product will live its life. So what I'm going to do in the rest of this presentation is take all this step and trying to tell what I think security should do during those steps to be effective on the end-to-end process. So just before the project starts, so someone has an idea, we want a new product, a C-level, the exec committee, I don't know, decide it's good, we're going to launch a new project. What should we do as a product security officer? You should identify what I called a business risk owner. It's the person, the one person who is going to jail if it's applicable, if there is an issue later. Or which person is responsible for the entity within your company who is going to pay in a case of a security breach. This should be high-level people most of the time. And you need to know it. You need to have a name. You can go, for example, to legal or to finance to help you decide or find who is this person within the company, but you should find it before the project starts. You should define what I've called here a security decision process. So the idea is to decide before the project who is empowered to take which kind of risk. And I'm talking about project risk. What I call project risk is everything that could cause delay, quality issue, cost issue for the project, or business risk. Okay, what happened if in 2 years ago there is a vulnerability and I lost of my client data, for example. So who is going to take the decision? And the process should be documented and should be agreed upon by all stakeholders. So your business risk owner, the project people, the project persons, everyone. Then if you have a team of security engineers, I hope you have one. If you are alone, you're going to decide that by yourself and the project. You're going to define a security support strategy. So typically, what I call a security support strategy is, for example, one of the projects I made, we decided that all security requirements would be accepted by default. So they're going to have no discussion by default on security requirements. But if something would happen during the project, if we discover during the project that a security requirement poses a specific issue for a specific function or cost, quality, delay of the project, we would take a decision on this specific security function. So that's a kind of strategy you could do. Then you should nominate a product security officer for the project or the program. It should be a single point of contact. Okay? You do not want to have 5 or 6 security engineers all speaking at the same time. If you do that, what the project or the business is going to do is to ask all engineers and choose the solutions that they like the most. So it's not possible. You should have single point of contact who is in charge to make sure that every security engineer comes to an agreed solution and to communicate this decision, this recommendation to the project. The security officer should have clear responsibility within the project management. Okay, same as a business risk owner. So, the project launch. A product manager or a marketing team, I don't know, put a brief marketing. Okay. Most of the time, security is not here. If you are lucky enough, you're here. If you're here at this moment, it's a moment to do business risk analysis. So you should talk to the business, to your business risk owner, for example, and decide with them what are the high-level priorities security-wise. Is it branding? Are you actually developing a security product, in which case security is an expected functionality? Do you have legal obligation? I don't know, for example, GDPR. This is the kind of thing. You should have maybe like 4 or 5 high-level risks that should be, if you're lucky, the business owner should be able to give you those risks. Most of the time they don't. So you should talk with them, propose a risk prioritization, and they should agree to it. Okay, so you have your roadmap. It's your direction, your global direction during all the projects. Now, somewhere along the phase, the project are going to write expression of requirements, expression of needs, specification, high-level specification, the name change for a company to another. It's a set of functionality requirement most of the time. So, in a perfect world, everybody should read all the project requirements, and people should read your security requirements, and everybody should be happy. Most of the time, what you have to understand is that people doesn't understand basic security reasoning, so they won't be able to actually read your requirement if you have them and to understand what it means for them. So you have to read the expression of needs or expression of requirement of everybody else. And it's very important that you do that, because this is the first occasion to avoid future complication. For example, I had one time for a device where every binary should be authenticated before being executed. I had somewhere in an expression, a book of requirements, someone wrote that they should be able to download driver on demand on the web, for example, which was very difficult to do if you had to actually authenticate all your binary running in the device. So it's the moment that you're able to go to this person and say, hey, I've read your need. Are you aware that there is a big security cost associated with your demand? Do you know it? And most of the time they know, they don't. So you have a chance here for the people to say, actually, it's not that important. It was just nice to have, we're just going to scratch it. And it's better to see it now that, I don't know, 3 months into the development phase. It's also the time where you should ask yourself, is there risky product function security-wise? For example, everything that is connection for social media could be problematic security-wise because there is personal data in it. Is there, on the other hand, security functions that you're going to ask who are going to be risky, complicated? So maybe they're difficult to develop, maybe they put a lot of constraint on the developers, I don't know. You should identify those. So until then, we talk about the product and not a lot about security. It's a moment to go technical for you. So you should have a set of needs, of requirement of security. My advice on that, try to write them as requirement, not technical solution. Typically, if you can, sometimes you can't, don't write HTTPS if what you want is actually an authenticated and ciphered connection. Okay, just write that, not just HTTPS. Honestly, it's gonna be much easier to talk with the project and developers if you don't impose a solution. So you should have a list of requirements. You should be ready as a product security engineer to follow the completion of those requirements. So you should be able to identify who is going to develop or answer this requirement and how, and you should be able to say, oh, this requirement is actually unmet or partially met because the function is not full, because we had to do compromise. You're gonna have to do compromise. Also, you should have a link on a form or another between your requirement and the business risk that you have identified at the beginning, or if you did that, technical security risks. So you should be able to say, I want, I don't know, GRSEC, for example, because I want to mitigate the risk of a vulnerability exploitation, for example. So if your company chooses so, and most of the times they do, they're gonna actually subcontract the development, sometimes the full integration, the full realization to an external company. Okay, so you're gonna have what we call a request for proposal. If it's internal, sometimes they're just gonna ask internally who knows how to develop this part, and the process will be quite the same. So when you do an RFP or a contract, this RFP must embed your security needs. You need to fight with that. You need to go to see buyers, finance, and legal, and to make sure that your requirements are in the RFP. Okay? Because it's in the RFP, before issuing it, you should make sure that your needs and requirement do not conflict with the rest of the requirements. So if you have a device which is supposed to be connected to the internet and the security requirement is no internet connection, you have an issue. So you should make sure it doesn't happen, and if there is a conflict, you should prepare what we call a decision case, and we talked about that later. And you should have resolved all conflict before RFP. Your supplier or the team who is going to develop must detail how they plan to meet your requirements. So if you said, for example, again, I want an authenticated connection, they should say, okay, I plan to put HTTPS with this crypto suite and this type of certificate, for example. You should be able to say to your supplier or your team developers, okay, this actually fulfills the solution, the requirement. No, it doesn't fulfill it. Okay? Please, it's now the time to think about 2 clauses that you have to have in your final contract, and which are always forgotten. First, the correction of security issue during the project life and during the product life should be included in contract. Too often I've seen people ask for patch for a public CVE, for example, and the supplier said it's not in the contract, you should pay. Okay, so please put it in the contract from the beginning. Same, don't forget to add a pen test and audit clause into the contract that allow you as a client to actually pen test what you have been delivered, or to pen test the infrastructure if it's a service of your supplier. Too often, when I was in, and I am actually in offensive team, we were blocked because there were actually no authorization to pen test the supplier, and so again, you've lost. So, most of the projects have what we call quality cost time process. It maybe have some name. It's how to make sure that the project doesn't cost too much, is finished in time to the project to be launched, and is not full of bug. Okay, you have to have the same process for product security. I know Security engineers don't like that, but actually you have to have it. So you need a security planning. From the beginning, you should have in the overall project planning time slot reserved for security, typically for pen test. Okay, so you should have written somewhere in the project planning that before lunch you should have, I don't know, maybe 1 month of pen test. Okay, same for quality, same for security requirements. You should be in the planning. So most of the time it's unnecessary to the security engineer I've worked with, but it allows one to normalize security in project. It's not just weird people being paranoid, it's actually a project stream like other stream. It's something that project should do. It also allows security to demonstrate the work that is done, and that can be problematic when you do product security, because most of the time you're doing phone calls and meetings to explain to people what they should do, and in a lot of companies that isn't considered as work because there is no deliverable. You're just making phone calls, but it's your work actually. So it's important to be as integrated in the project process as you can. It's also help defend against it's the security people who cause the project being late. I've heard that a lot, because security is often forgotten. So as the last time we decide, oh, we forgot to do security, we're going to do it, but because of that we're late, so it's the security people's fault. So please, integrate yourself in the planning. You need to also trace the security costs. So that could be man days, most of the time it's man days, but it could be buying some stuff if you need to, equipment, subcontracting, I don't know. It's important to argument and to populate the security decision case to say we don't cost that much or we did cost a lot. It's also to recognize and reward security expert investment, again, the time in meeting, and it's gonna allow you to improve your process from time to time. If you've reserved, I don't know, 2 weeks to write security requirements, and actually it's taken 4 weeks, well, you know it. Next time you do better, you're gonna write 4 weeks into the planning. So I've talked several times about what is about a security decision case. So what is it? So for me, it's when a security requirement is problematic for the project. Problematic because it either conflicts with another project requirements, so it could render a functionality unuseful, for example, or it has impact on either quality, cost, time of the project, or maybe something else, I don't know. Okay, so you're going to prepare a case, slides most of the time, to present to someone who is going to make the decision. Okay, so this case should be prepared by the security teams and the impacted teams on the project. So, for example, if a security function takes too long to develop, or someone say it's too long, you should have around the table the security teams and the development team, which is saying it's problematic. Okay. Ideally, you should be able to present 3 scenarios, and for each of them associated gains and cost. So one scenario without security. Okay, I just redraw my requirements. The product or the project gain should be quantified. It's going to cost that much money less. It's going to gain us this amount of time, for example. It's going to allow us this kind of function. It should be written. Okay, and security team should highlight the cost or legal or brand impact in case of the risk realization, if there is actually an attack later. Same thing with the opposite scenario, so optimal security. We go full security. So the impacted team should say how much it's going to cost them for the product, again, or the project. And the scenario, the security should say, with this, I'm going to avoid this kind of cost. Okay? And if you can, do an intermediate scenario somewhere in the middle. Once you've written all that, you can present it to the right management level that you decide at the beginning, and they're going to take a decision. Okay, it's really important that you go to the right level, that you decide at the beginning of the project. So it could be, for example, the business risk owner if it's a very high risk for the project or the security. Okay, and you're going to see most of the time a solution is found while preparing the case. I've seen it, and no decision is needed. Either because everybody agree on a middle case solution and the risks are low on both sides, or most of the time also because people on each side did not understand the problem on the other side, and while rating the scenarios, they understand it, and so they're able to find a perfect solution. Okay, and in this case, everybody win. To prepare the cost, gain, legal, brand, etc. Impact, you can do with help. So please call your finance guy, your legal contact, your communication contact. If we're talking about brand part, they could really help you. Too often, what I've seen is security trying to convince a C-level using an imaginary catastrophic scenario. You know, imagine if the attacker wants this kind of stuff, which is very rare, and the client is, I don't know, the president of the United States. Imagine the catastrophe. Okay, so it's sometimes useful as an illustration when you're talking to people, but honestly, that doesn't allow to strategic decision for C-level people. So don't do that in the security decision case. Okay. So like I said, finance and legal are your friends. Call them. They will help you quantifying risk impact, and honestly, they will. One time, I wanted a security function, and the IT was saying it costs 12 million in a one shot to do it. And when I went to finance, I learned that actually my security function could make the company gain like 8 million a year or something like that. So the decision was not the same after that. They even sometimes find new catastrophic scenario for you because they know their job. Okay. Second, so they're going to help you. And also, when the potential consequences of security issue are written by those entities, your impact is amplified because most of the time we trust them a lot more than we trust security. I'm sorry, but most of the times that's the case. So we made a pause for the security decision case. In the meantime, your project is in its development phase. So somewhere we've designed the product and we've written detailed specification. Okay, like I said, let the different project team or your supplier offer the technical solutions that met your requirement. Of course, help them find a solution, help them understand your requirement, but please do not impose a technical solution. If there is too much of an issue, make a security decision case. Okay, and if there is a decision which is not full security that makes that you're gonna have to compromise, you should actually trace and document all gaps and non-compliance, and you should be able to actually trace also the associated residual risk. The idea is in the product life, if something happened, someone should be able to go to your document and say, okay, this is the scenarios that have been identified, this is the risk that have been identified, this is what have been proposed, or I don't know, it should exist somewhere. Okay. When you have a development phase, you always have at the end of it or in the middle of it or all around with the agile mode, a quality phase. So somewhere a team are going to test one by one, doing individual tests, all the functionality of your product. Most of the time, security is not a part of it. I advise to try to be a part of it. Okay, so you're gonna have you have asked either a development team or a supplier to develop security function, and so there is quality to check. Okay, so identify what can be followed by standard quality process. Typically, a firewall configuration could be checked by a quality process. It's just diffing files, okay? And what can't be evaluated by a quality process and should be evaluated by a pen test, okay? And security team should go and support the quality team to evaluate the default criticality. But the test could be done by quality people, okay? And just a pen test is not a quality process, not at all, okay? It's just going to give you a picture of a resistance of your product at a specific moment. That's all. That's not quality. So during the full project, you have to follow and update the macro security risk board that you've written at the beginning, and the objective is clear reporting. Okay, it allows you also to raise warning earlier. If the risk stay high during the full project, I don't know, for a 3-year project, and 3 months before launch you're still high at the risk, you have an issue. Okay, you should again follow and document all residual risk that you identified. So whether it's a gap in the development between your requirement and the actual solution, or maybe something we found during pen test, I don't know. So you should document what the risk, what is or are the impacts in case of realization. Is it mitigate? Maybe by an organizational measure, I don't know. Is it accepted? If yes, who did accept this risk? The idea again is to be able for other team to follow the security of the product during this life. So the launch is approaching. The product is nearly done. You're close to the end of the quality phase and everything like that. Now you can do a pen test. Okay, so you need to decide what needs a pen test, what needs maybe a deeper analysis with I don't know, reverse engineering or everything like that. At the time, scope the test. So it's not a free-for-all. Of course, you can do that, but the idea is to make sure you didn't forget anything. So make the pen tester try your most feared scenario, for example, or maybe you have some function you're not too sure about, so make them try and break this function or see if they're very useful. Okay, if there is findings which are non-basic, you need to do a risk analysis, exactly like for a non-compliance issue, for example. If there are really problematic, like big security issue, you should have a security decision case. You should be able to go to your business owner and say, okay, so the pen test said it's too easy to go root on all of our devices, so I don't know if we should launch. Okay, you should be able to do that. And of course, you have a pen test, you should have a correction plan, okay? The pen test itself is not a stamp of security, it just means that someone looked at your product, you need to do something about it after. Okay, if you have security team responsible for production, so for the product life, SOC, CERT, I don't know, you should embed them in your project if it's not already done. So you should present and explain the status of all residual risk. You should explain the mitigation planning. You should check with them that everything that they could need later is actually documented, etc., etc. And before launch, you should meet with the business risk owner, and they should be okay with the residual risks before launch. Okay. Of course, when you go to see a C-level to sign for a risk, you should present him with a mitigation plan. That could be after launch, but you should have one. So there is a launch. The product is production, everybody is happy, you have drunk champagne. I recommend to continue to keep a mixed team for a few months. So don't put everything over to the production team if it exists. Keep some kind of a relationship between the project security team and the production security team, okay? For example, to follow the remediation plan and to help knowledge transfer. It's also the time to do a post-mortem on the security process, so discuss with the project, with the risk owner, with the security engineer, what you did right, what you did wrong, what did not work, why, trying to get the lesson of your experience and share it internally. Okay, and what I call production security team, if you have that, I hope you do, it's a team who is going to be responsible for like vulnerability management, patch management, and it's going to be the team that's going to advise the project if something in the deployment context evolve that could impact security. Typically, we decide to connect all our product into 4G when this product were designed not to be connected at all. And everybody's happy. You've done. So what to conclude about that, what to take away? For me, the best way to be efficient in product security is to normalize security within the project. Do everything like the other streams, development, I don't know, brand legal is doing, because it helps us fit and be taken seriously. Also, look closer at legal and finance, because we're close to them, and so they do think that works. We should be inspired by them. And the final, but you know that if you do security, earlier is better. The earlier we go into a project development, the better we are, the more effective and the less painful it's going to be. Thank you very much.